before I begin, let me just give you a little bit about who I am. I am a reformed enterprise architect. I was all about infrastructure, and really about 8-9 years ago, now I actually started caring about applications. That's a long story, which requires a lot of conversation. I am proud, not really proud, but I have uploaded my peers' AWS keys to a public GitHub repository. Yes, that's where that fail to scale comes in. I've been in DevRel for a little over 5 years. Prior to that, I was 10 years at VMware in a variety of roles. And then before that, I was on the customer side, doing lots of fun things in the enterprise space. I worked for a home builder, which also happens to build in Phoenix, in the Phoenix area. And so have done decent amount of work in the area, even though I live in Fort Worth. I am a DevOps fanatic. I'm actually to the point where I love to inject security into this conversation. And while I'm a native Texan, I do enjoy some football or soccer, as you can tell by the flag with Arsenal on it. And I prefer seafood over steak. So don't judge me for those of you that are beef lovers. I always like to kind of keep it light, keep it fun. And as I said, while I can talk and talk a lot, I don't want to do all the talking. So if anybody wants to give me a hard time for being a Texan, now is the time to do it. 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. Nobody wants to make fun of me. It's deserving. Let's jump into this. So I always start with this kind of basic slide. Let's talk about the fundamentals or the path that we have taken over the past, I would say 10, 15, 20 years. Does anybody on the call, were you ever responsible for pixie booting physical servers? Anybody want to jump on and acknowledge that they had that responsibility at any point in time? Does everybody even know what pixie booting is?
What do you mean by pixie booting?
Okay, fair. So I'm not the only one. Some folks may be a little bit younger than I am, but in many ways, an installation of an operating system was technically infrastructure. Deployment and delivery, just done in a very different fashion. And so I've been in and around this really my entire enterprise IT career and world. And so this is kind of my journey really over the past probably 8 years or so of where delivery of infrastructure kind of shifted, and then ultimately what it is, what it has become. So before I go any further, I'm going to ask one more question for the audience. Are there any software developers on the call or on the meetup today that your job is day in, day out, you're a software developer? Feel free to jump in the chat or speak up if you are. Anybody? Nope. Okay. So Robert, one of your roles, cool, not this century. I love it, Don. That's awesome. So give a little bit of background on that. So last week we were at Continuous Delivery Con, focused on DevOps. I was co-hosted with OpenJS World, and at that event we got to talk to a variety of platform engineers, SREs. Stephen, I feel seen. That's awesome. SREs. And then actual, day in, day out, front end, back end developers. And one of the common things that I kept hearing from the front end, back end, day in, day out software developers, not necessarily DevOps or SRE engineers, is they own their infrastructure, which is becoming a very common thing. There really is not a lot of division or silos in some cases, maybe in different enterprises, maybe not. But they all have this idea of, well, we do software delivery. You're saying you do the same thing for infrastructure delivery, right? And so to kind of put that in focus of where we all are, let's talk about where this began. And we all have built locally. This is a very simple view. If you know this diagram, it actually comes directly from Hashi, and it's pretty simple. I'm going to take Terraform code. I'm going to make a few changes that fit my environment and my infrastructure. I'm going to use modules. I'm going to get very creative, whatever it may be, and then I'm going to upload it to a repository. Oh, wait, we skipped that step, right? We used to do this locally. Like we did it on our desktops, we did it on our workstations, and we planned it, we applied it, and we provisioned workloads, right? Pretty simple. We loved it. It was great. And I was a big fan, right? I think I started early on in the Hashi days, utilizing Terraform, even while I worked at VMware. So that could probably tell you where VMware felt about me a little bit at times. But we were provisioning infrastructure and then provisioning cloud infrastructure. We were doing it locally, pretty simple. But then things changed a little bit. We have teams, we have groups, we have different, organizational structures, right? That's what DevOps is all about, is taking this from local myself, scaling it, moving forward. And so in my case, the team I was on, there were 7 of us, and we started to run into problems, right? What about state? What if somebody left the team? Where would that code sit? What if I wanted to make changes and I blew up their changes, right? So building locally worked, but it didn't scale. And so we'll talk about that just a little bit more. This is an example of an application that my team deployed. And you can ignore all the logos on the right-hand side. I'll fill you in on what that means in just a second. But on the left-hand side, you see 2 web apps. There's going to be 2 web servers, a couple of app servers, both Django, Flask, a database load balancer, and a couple of databases, right? Pretty simple. At one point in time, we manually deployed this. It was fun because manual deployments are great. And we decided to get genius and start building this iteratively. So we started with the basic, EC2 instances and built out the servers. And then we manually installed the application. Problem is, didn't scale. Somebody on the app layer, somebody on the DB layer, right? You ended up waiting and, kind of conversing and breaking each other's situations, and it just didn't really fit. So then we took this even more genius idea at the time and said, let's take Jenkins and let's build from infrastructure to app with Jenkins. We did. Is any Jenkins users in the world? It is the Swiss Army knife, as one of my peers refers to it, and it will do whatever you want it to do. A sledgehammer. Thanks, Derek. It is a sledgehammer. And we did it with Jenkins. It was great. Yes, it's Jenkins, right? So the next thing was, we were like, okay, this is great, but it really doesn't scale, and it was just a pain. And so we had one of my peers, insert Ansible into the conversation. So Jenkins, then to Ansible to hand off some of the deployment process, configuration side. It was just a little bit easier. And just so you're aware, that is where I uploaded my peer's keys to a public repository. And I can promise you within 6 minutes, because we have it tracked, it was not only picked up from a bot, but there was workloads being deployed all across the world. Thankfully, AWS was really, really quick, and they stopped it at about minute 14. And they were really good about it. But my peer, his entire, AWS account was trashed at that point. And so we discovered there are more pitfalls and more complaints. So then we took it to a third step, and we took GitLab, and this was GitLab, 5 or 6 years ago, or not 5 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, early stages, GitLab runners, and we took GitLab and Terraform, and we built this entire pipeline in GitLab. You could actually go out. It's still a talk available on YouTube, where we deployed this entire application from infra to app inside of GitLab, or with GitLab. And the other thing we did at that point in time is we took it beyond, and we actually added some checks and balances to the mix. So you kind of see this built locally. Let's use some CI/CD solutions. Now we wanted to do some reactive things. And in our example, we use Cloud Health. Obviously, I was at VMware at the time. And we use some other open source solutions to do things like container checks, to do library checks, to do validation of cost and visibility and analysis, right? So you kind of see this vision and journey coming to fruition. So before I ask, kind of pause for a second and ask a question, I'm going to show you how we did the cost visibility at the time, because it was cool. This happens to be both YAML from GitLab as well as a Python script or Python app that we actually called, and we did a check of the budget based upon what Cloud Health predicted those workloads would cost. Right. And even in there, we actually transitioned from being EC2 instances with apps on top to Kubernetes. Right. So you see this kind of journey. So I'm going to pause real quick. Does this journey in some ways match any of your journeys? And if it does, feel free to jump on and talk a little bit about what your journey looked like at this stage. Makefile. That's true. Anybody want to jump in and give an idea?
Yeah, so we were I was leading some migrations, and we were doing things very similar, deploying to ECS. And one of the keys is that we were generating developers, application engineers were working with Docker Compose locally and running their app, and we would translate those to ECS task and service definitions automatically, so that they don't have to know, how ECS tasks work. But yeah, like lots of glue.
Yes, lots of Jenkins, lots of glue, and because of I'm not the greatest, and we all make mistakes. It was lots of failures. Anybody else have any thoughts, comments, or been in a little similar situation, or maybe even slightly different with some of the existing tooling that was out there? All right, I'll give it. I'll give it. Everybody loves Jenkins and everybody loves Ansible, and nobody ever makes mistakes. So to kind of give a quick synopsis of what that meant for me, or at least for us, the things we started to see was isolated development. We begin to create our own silos, and that didn't necessarily work. But what we wanted to do was mature, right? We wanted to try different things, like, as you mentioned, Stephen, ECS. We wanted to try Kubernetes, and that's where we started looking at EKS and AKS and GKE, depending on what your cloud provider of choice was. And we were attempting to mature, but still with some, I would argue, non-DevOps principles and practices. And we were just repurposing stuff. That's what we did. And we made it work, right? We hacked it, we glued it, we broke it. I call it duct tape and baling wire. But we missed some of, I think, the fundamentals of what DevOps was meant to be, right? And so IAC, infrastructure as code or infrastructure delivery, it began to shift a little bit towards the software development, life cycle and maturity and methodologies, but it wasn't perfect. And so then in my journey, and probably in many of your journeys, you were introduced not only to Terraform, CloudFormation templates, and others, but then you probably jumped into the OSS world and used TerraGrunt. So I'm going to pause real quick. If anybody wants to chime in, does anybody use TerraGrunt today, or have you used TerraGrunt and subsequently moved away from it? Or do you not know what TerraGrunt is? And I can give a quick synopsis. Feel free to jump in on the chat or jump in on the conversation. I'll pause. There we go. We are migrating away from it. I've heard that multiple folks. Fair. So good to hear, Neil. I think that aligns with a lot. Stephen built a model similar to TerraGrunt. There you go. Right. So TerraGrunt solved a few of the initial problems, of Terraform. And it was really about, structure, code structure, directory structure, and then how do I execute more than, a module at once? And how can I ultimately have some sort of hook functionality? right? And so Terragrunt solved some of the problems, but it didn't solve every problem. And I just noticed that my deck does not have the right Twitter handle. Sorry about that. I thought I fixed it. It's Spacelift.io. So then we were introduced to Atlantis. Now, Stephen, maybe you use Atlantis based upon your response. Maybe even Neil. You guys want to give me a quick idea if you're using it? Neil says yes. Makes sense. So Neil,
we recently tried Atlantis and we didn't like it, so we deprecated it, and now we're back to Don's working on our solution. Don Thornton.
Okay. Let me ask you this, if you don't mind, just for the rest of the audience, what were your problems with Atlantis?
The code base I inherited was it was a mono repo of Terraform.
Yep.
And I'm not actually sure if I remember what was wrong with Atlantis specifically. There were some, so we adapted it to work with Terragrunt. So each environment could be deployed separately with Terragrunt. The flow in GitHub was nice as far as the feedback you got with the plan. Yeah, I had a whole list of reasons why Atlantis didn't work. I'm coming up with a blank right now.
No, and that's fair. Derek, you want to chime in?
I think secrets was one of them.
Okay, secrets
being able
management.
to deploy secrets was one. Yeah.
Fair. Derek, you want to chime in there and give your thoughts on Atlantis real quick, if you don't mind, if you can, or are you on mute? Derek is leaving me hanging. Don't have the headset going. Okay, that's fair. So I am. So Neil, you're not the first one that I've heard that from. I do think it's kind of funny that you mentioned trying to integrate both Terragrunt and Atlantis at the same time, which is not easy. No. And it's almost like two competing mindsets in some ways, or technological, mindsets. So yeah, not the first time I've heard that. Anybody else want to chime in on their OSS journey in trying to fix infrastructure delivery?
So I'll just comment that the number one thing that the key feature, or one of the key features of our delivery workflow, was the ability to review in GitHub in the PR what the proposed changes were. And so, yeah, I built that a couple times for clients before Atlantis went sort of mainstream, and then unfortunately got acquired by or acquired by HashiCorp, and seemed to, I'm not exactly sure what happened after that, but the being able to review and then like run tools to like highlight dangerous changes. Like a DynamoDB table is changing, or data resources are being deleted, were the most critical features.
Fair. Yeah, and I'm a big fan of both Terragrunt and Atlantis from a conceptual perspective, right? But there are some limitations in them at the end of the day. Big fan of the Atlantis workflow, personally. I like the collaboration. I like the ability to have, PR comments, and really it works from that perspective, or even some sort of process, right? But that was limited to what you were trying to accomplish. So one of the things that was probably more important for me at the time, and still is today, is there is more than just Terraform. Is anybody on the Zoom today? Are you using just Terraform, or just CloudFormation, or just Pulumi, or Azure Resource Manager? Is anybody able to say that they just have to support one? Feel free to jump in on the chat.
Usually I just support one in a particular environment.
Yep.
So if I'm working, for example, in AWS, the vast majority of the time they want to use CloudFormation.
Yep. Fair.
And in most of the other environments in which I work, where Terraform exists, nobody wants to go beyond Terraform.
Yep.
They don't trust anything else. Let's put it that way.
Oh yeah. And I mean, that's the key, right? Some folks have a desire to go to one direction, right? But you get into cloud formation, you lose some of the workflow capabilities, you lose some of the maybe the GitOps capabilities if you want to go that route. But most organizations, whether it's a single environment, multiple environments, there's going to be a flavor of everything.
The problem we have with cloud formation is actually just the proliferation of stacks that we run into.
Yep. The scale problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's hard to manage, hard to maintain. And yeah, I understand the pain. The other thing is it doesn't really, obviously there's more than Terraform, but then each of the flavors introduce their own challenges. So it's always a different, way to look at it. The other thing is a lack of visibility, and I don't know who just gave the comments about stacks inside of CloudFormation. Have you ever had to try to discover a stack of a stack of a stack of a stack?
Yes.
Where you're like, where is this coming from?
Yeah, this is Mike Amy, and yes, I have.
Did you enjoy that? Was it like, did it make your day like super awesome?
I was working. It was also a situation where I didn't have direct access to the environment. So I had to work through someone who did. So yeah, it took hours to get everything down.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry. I feel your pain, and I need to buy you a coffee or a drink of your choice next time we happen to be in the same location, because I feel your pain. The other thing that kind of came into this whole equation is security, right? Where does security fit into this? Are we doing the things that we should be doing? Are we introducing, policy capabilities that prevent me from uploading my keys to GitHub? Obviously, GitHub has fixed that, thankfully. And there's obviously some other open source tools. But then what about, should this EC3, EC2 bucket this S3 bucket be wide open? Should this EC2 instance have IAM capabilities, maybe, or SAM capabilities that maybe is a little too much, right? Should our Kubernetes clusters face the internet? Like all these like random questions that don't really get solved in just the native, infrastructure or infrastructure delivery world, right? So all of this is kind of my personal synopsis of where my journey has come. And that's why there's a lot of fail in there. And then ultimately how to get to scale. So before I go any further and talk a little bit about, I think, ways we can solve this, anybody have any thoughts, comments, share the same sentiment, or did I miss some of your challenges or some of the problems you may have had along the way? Or do you disagree with me and your world has been, better than mine?
Well, one problem you missed, and I don't think you meant to, is, I've run into this in 3 different employers, is you're in a dedicated DevOps team, and then over on the other side of the world are the devs doing their thing, totally separate. They don't want to change tools.
Yep.
It's a big problem.
Oh yeah. I would lump that under silos and teams. Because nobody likes, look, we all are opinionated. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we all have our own opinions. We think things work better for us versus others. And I do believe opinions are good. But how can I be unopinionated while being opinionated is something I've started to think about over the years. And I don't think I've solved it yet, by the way. And so, yeah, I totally agree. Silos, teams, different tooling, tools fatigue. I'm even tired of, DevOps or software companies saying that they're like a DevOps platform, or, they are DevOps, which is just a complete lie. I could get on my soapbox there. Anybody else have any comments, other things I missed or maybe even disagree with? Perfect. I'm not shy, so feel free if you want to, you want to check me. So I told you I didn't want to do a sales pitch, and I'm going to give you just a quick overview of Spacelift, and I'll show you kind of where I think we solved the problem, and we'll go back to discussion. But this is what we are attempting to solve at Spacelift. Pretty clear. Infrastructure as code is multiplayer. There's multiple folks engaged. There's multiple teams. There's this weird proliferation of DevOps teams or SREs, and now platform teams, and even in some cases, app dev folks who own their infrastructure, or it's more of a shared model. The second thing is GitOps is real. I personally hated it. This idea of GitOps when it first came out. I'm like, that sounds terrible, but it actually works. And it's all about PRs and mergers and code changes and tracking and commenting. And, Derek's on my team. And if Derek wants to make a change to a piece of infrastructure, right, I can set up approval processes, or I could just give them carte blanche, right? And so that's definitely one of the areas that I know we like to focus on. As I mentioned, security and DevOps is key as well. Derek says not a great idea. Derek, I'm the one who uploaded my peers' keys to AWS, so I can't really talk. But then around drift detection, this is the other key, and the idea of stacks on stacks and beyond is difficult. And what happens when stuff changes? Does anybody on the call today, does your organization limit GUI access while providing programmatic access and or DevOps principles and precepts kind of all at the same time, to where you don't have any drift and you don't need remediation? Is anybody that lucky and fortunate today? I don't think so. And so that's another area we definitely want to focus on is oh, Neil says last job, current job, no. How did that work out, Neil? was that good? Did you still have drift even though maybe you didn't have GUI access but programmatic access?
Yeah, we still had some drift. Source code changes.
Oh, yeah. It's we're humans, right? We want to go do quick things. You're never going to get away from drift, right? So how do we remediate that is another one. And as I mentioned earlier, cost visibility is still important. Maybe the folks on the call don't care about it. I personally didn't care about cost visibility for several years. And then I took a role as a manager and a director and now head of DevRel, and I have to manage my cost. And I cared. And Don says, this is why I consider state ephemeral. That's very fair. It's the way it works, right? Disposable, not immutable. Interesting. So I start to see the wheels turning and, all kind of getting on the same page about state and about drift and about, what we're building. And so let me do this real quick. I want to show just a quick highlight of Spacelift because technically I have to. And you're like, why do we need a sales pitch? It's not really a sales pitch, but I do have something to offer all of you after we get done here. So let me share my screen and just show you just a snippet of how I think we have come to the point of trying to solve this. And we are continuing to improve and, all that good stuff. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Anybody want to give me a yes or a no real quick? Got it. Thank you. I always like to make sure that it is working. So this is Spacelift. I'm not going to go through everything, but you can actually see real simply kind of where we are taking the idea of your resource, your resource solutions, your GitLabs, GitHubs, Bitbuckets of the world, and we are going to consume those. We're going to consume your public cloud, AWS, Azure, Google, your cloud credentials, and we are going to then take Terraform, Pulumi, CloudFormation templates, even Kubernetes, and we can build stacks and incorporate base infrastructure as code features and functions, along with the things like drift detection, policies, private registry module from a Terraform perspective, and introduce some security on top. And let me just show you a quick one. So this is Terraform. It's our example for drift detection. And, pretty simple here. You can see what the repository is, what version of Terraform, what branch, all the way to the branch details and specificity. You can actually see what occurred on the last run. This is just about an S3 bucket, but you can even trigger different runs. And in my example, I'll just go take a look at the private workers, and I can just do a quick trigger, and it is now going to kick off a job. Now you might say, cool, what's so different? What's so special? I can do this locally. I get a little bit of this capabilities with TerraGrunt with Atlantis, right? We're adding, additional layers on top of that. So comments, PRs as well. And while that is initializing, you can do stacks on stacks is another example. But where I personally find extreme value is in the policies. So a lot of organizations are doing some manual steps, but we use Open Policy Agent underneath. And we have a lot of different policies, from triggers to plans to pushes to access. And it really just is about what you are trying to accomplish. And in this example, we can even do an InfraCost monthly cost assessment, right, with that. And then I'll show you one more kind of quick view. This is all of the runs, or this is one of the current runs in my environment. And it shows you kind of the shifts or changes that may have occurred, and or any users that are associated with those runs and who ran them. And I see myself in here as well, but you can even go back in time and look at history and look at different triggers, or you can look at the stacks themselves. And it will, get lengthy at that point in time. So let me just jump back to 4 hours. I don't think there's anything additional. Yeah, nothing additional, but it shows the stack itself, and you can see, additional details about that stack, labels, branch, what the runtime configuration was. And then you can obviously go back to the stacks views I showed you earlier. So at the end of the day, we're making a bunch of different, kind of commonality problems. We run full TerraGrunt, except for a full dry run, and then, which is really hard to do, and we think is, can be replaced in another fashion. We do support the Atlantis workflows, PR comments, and we build even more on top of those workflows. So I'll pause real quick and see if there's any high level questions. That way we don't go too far into the weeds. Doesn't mean we won't or can't, but for the sake of me getting off of a sales pitch real quick, any comments or questions out there? Okay, so good. I'm glad we didn't go too far down that. And I look, I know that I didn't give a full-fledged demo. That was not the goal here. So you're saying, why did I have to listen to 3 minutes of a demo? So what I wanted to do is, the way I treat meetups is a little bit differently, right? I'm not here to give you a full-on sales pitch. I'm here to help you kind of navigate your journey and maybe help solve it in some ways, whether it's open source, or in our case, with Spacelift itself. And so what I want to do is, knowing that this was going to be broadcasted on YouTube, Steve and I were talking, and I was going to do a giveaway live on the recording, but then it would go up on YouTube. So what I'm going to do is offer up a giveaway, and I will put it in the meetup actual chat window itself, or I'll have Steven share it with all of you. That way you can enter to win a Lego Discovery Space Shuttle. And it looks like this, fully built. This is one fully built. Yes, I'm a Lego door. But I'm going to offer that up to the folks for joining us today, or even watching probably over the next week or so. But I'm going to shut up for just a minute and see if Robert, well done, sir. Oh, okay. I'm going to see, is there any questions, comments, thoughts? Infrastructure is code, policy is code. Where we've come from an infrastructure delivery perspective. Feel free to jump in, chime in, ask a question in chat, or yeah.
So I have a question.
Sure.
This is Stephen. What are one of the most valuable, or the most valuable part of the infrastructure delivery process that we constructed, or that I helped construct with clients, was the ability to review for risk in the change, and then like literally it needed approval to proceed. So what are the most important risks that you see customers trying to manage? I asked that to help uncover issues that folks may not be thinking about right now.
Oh, that is a loaded question. Hey, Ryan, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I have a technical answer to this, but Ryan, jump in. I want to hear your thoughts on some of the policy technical risk things that you're seeing in this space today.
Yep. So when I joined Spacelift, I think there were 6 or 7 policies. We've since added the approval policy, and then more recently, some more Atlanta style workflows. But some of the policies, the approval policy hooks right into OPA, and it gets very flexible. So you may get 2 approvals from the product manager and let's call it the director of DevOps, but maybe the CTO is having a bad day and says deny, and it denies the policy. It gets pretty granular, or you can't approve it at this hour on this day of the week when you're drinking coffee, type of thing. So you can get pretty creative with OPA, with the Rego. The policies that I see a lot of use for, not necessarily in the approvals, but is the trigger policies and the git push policies. So a lot of customers, whether they have a large mono repo or they have multiple repos, they want to, they make a change and they don't want to have 1,000 deployments happen. They only want one occur, and you can get pretty flexible in that. The triggers are, if I deploy to a change to, let's say, New Zealand, then I want Australia to deploy, then I want India, then Europe, and you can have kind of this daisy chain effect, which gets rid of kind of the manual deployments and has a systematic approach. So the world is your oyster in that regard. You get pretty flexible.
Yeah. Now, and Ryan, I think why I wanted Ryan to answer that. Ryan's probably the number one individual on our team who talks with customers day in and day out. So I wanted him to answer that. And I think the key is we want to help in whatever scenario your organization comes up with. So we have built the platform ourselves to manage that. We also use it, right? But as much as I would love to give there's the top 3 things that organizations are focusing on when it comes to risk, Stephen, unfortunately, it just varies by org. And so we try to build around that and be opinionated while unopinionated all at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. And, I was thinking minimally like a frequency analysis of the checks you actually see deployed.
Yep.
Right. That data doesn't, it at least is objective from a certain point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do support that. So looking at what's changed, the minor changes, how frequent, right? If it's ephemeral, right? Those types of things definitely come about.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think, Sean, one more thing to add. We gave kind of the ClickOps UI view of this.
Yeah.
That's not how people typically want to operate. They want to operate within Git, whether it's whatever your VCS provider is. They want to operate at the API level. Yep. Those are things that we, whether you're a 2-person company to a large organization, there's, we can meet people where they are, and that's a view of the world that we have. And it's not always right, but open to other feedback, because everything's API first, which helps. You can.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I personally consume Spacelift from an API and a CLI perspective, but that doesn't demo well. So I always like to show off the pretty graphics. Any other comments, thoughts, questions from the folks today?
You have stickers, Sean?
Oh, we are going to, so Ryan, throw that out there. So with that link that I'm going to post in the next couple days, some lucky winner will win the Lego. But I'm also going to offer up skip the pretty, show me the CLI. Don, we can do that. I'll send you a video. I will make stickers and some swag available to all of you, and we'll just we'll send them out as well. And then if you're going to be at any sort of reInvent or KubeCon or anything like that, I will be there. So, and the team will be there. So we can always do that there. Steven says, show me a pretty CLI.
Yeah.
Okay. I will follow up with the pretty CLI in the meetup chat. I failed. Forgive me.
I'm working on a pretty CLI right now. So we'll see what kind of reviews it gets.
Colors. That's awesome. Okay, there's no such thing as a pretty CLI, but we do have a good CLI. How about that?
Well, the output should be easily parsable in pipes, right?
There you go.
The exit
Very
code
fair.
should be reasonable.
Yes.
All right, cool. Well, thank you, Sean and Spacelift team. I think that was a great coverage of especially the history, how we got here, and the modern problems or the problems that modern delivery pipelines should be solving. Yeah. And we have the technology, whether you assemble it yourself or you buy a solution.
Yep.
So I just want to say thank you again, and we'll get the link you mentioned posted.
Yep.
And also, we will be having a meetup next month. Do we have it? Yes, I'm sure there's a.
Oh yeah. Hey Don, let me get out there. We definitely have a free trial. Let me just go grab the URL right now, and I'll post it in. But I'll post it as well afterwards, Stephen.
Okay, so we will be, Phoenix DevOps will be having a meetup next month. The topic is still TBD, talking with someone. Otherwise, it might be yours truly doing a deep dive or as deep as we want to go into scaling data security in AWS.
Ooh.
So
can I join that?
Yeah, absolutely. You have customer data, I'm sure. So,
yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll get the video posted up on YouTube and any of the little bits that Spacelift is sharing here. They'll make that available soon.
Hey, thanks for being a great host, Stephen.
Yep. Thank you, Ryan. Take care.